All eyes on Game Week 11 after a weekend of a few FPL surprises. But what has changed? Where are our priorities now for transfers? Well, let's find out in this week's Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid. This video is split into two parts, the first of which we'll be looking at those players you may already have in your team and which players you should keep and which you should sell. After that, we'll be looking at the players you might not have in your team, which ones you should buy and which ones you should avoid. Players will be tier listed with the best players at the top and the worst ones at the bottom. Yes, now welcome to FPL Mate. My name is Dan. We're looking at the forwards first of all of FPL, looking ahead to Game Week 11 and some of those maybe forwards that you should potentially keep here. And there are two forwards in particular that I just think have such good fixtures that no matter how disappointing they have been in recent game weeks, I think you've just got to keep them regardless. And actually, players like Bowen and Joao Pedro, if you guys watched the games involving West Ham and Chelsea, you'll know that Bowen had maybe an opportunity for an assist in that game. He did have some chances to score as well in that game, and Joao Pedro scored a goal finally, but actually maybe that one goal is actually kind of done him a bit of a disservice. He had plenty of chances in that game against Spurs. So could it be that Joao Pedro has a return to form? Possibly. Is Bowen still going to have some chances? Yes, I think he will. And against Burnley at home for Bowen and Wolves at home for Joao Pedro, despite it maybe being under a new manager, I still think these are two players that are well worth keeping for this fixture. Particularly Joao Pedro. I think over the next 2 game weeks we can really have a look at him and see if things have changed. But a small warning on Joao Pedro, the lap is going to be available from Game Week 11 onwards, and I'm not really sure if that is going to massively impact Joao Pedro or not. So it's going to be a player to keep an eye on, but for Wolves at home, I think he's certainly worth keeping and maybe someone we can reassess in the upcoming game weeks if you do still have him in your squad, but worth a keep. Thiago, another player worth keeping, I think, and now at 6.2 million, he was one of the cheaper forwards that people were buying last game week, and maybe some people expected instant results against Crystal Palace. It wasn't to be. But Newcastle at home up next, and Newcastle do seem to be struggling a little bit defensively at the moment. I will cover them a little bit more in terms of their defense later on in the video. But actually, I think Newcastle at home, it's a pretty decent time to be playing them right now. And after that for Thiago, we have Brighton and Burnley, which are two really nice fixtures. So for a cheap forward who has been pretty reliable this season, I do think he is well worth keeping at that kind of price tag. Moving on to the monitors, Voltemada, maybe some concern there, but he would be a very high monitor for me. The halftime substitution has to sting really in Game Week 10, but it seems like Eddie Howe just wanted to make some kind of changes because he was so disappointed with the way Newcastle played in the first half of the game against West Ham, and maybe Voltemada and Gordon as well were just the sacrificial lambs in that game. But there's still hopefully going to be some good to come from Voltemada because he has generally been playing pretty well up until Game Week 10 at least. Even in Game Week 9, yes, he blanked in that game, but he looked good, hit the crossbar or was the post in that game, so was an impressive performance then as well. So I think still lots to like about Voltemada. The fixtures coming up for Newcastle do start to get slightly worse. So if Voltemada is your only way of getting in maybe a Haaland or a Mateta, then at that point I would maybe consider selling him. But outside of that, he's probably going to be a player to keep. Ekitike is going to have some really nice fixtures from Game Week 12 onwards, but we need to know what's going on with the Isak situation first. So maybe a player just worth holding on to for now, maybe. Again, unless you do have other priorities. But honestly, down from Ekitike, any of these players could potentially be sold. Gyökeres, for example. Now, he has actually missed training today after picking up a muscle injury at the weekend, which forced him to be subbed at halftime. This is something we need to wait for more information about, although knowing Arteta, we probably won't get too much. Best case scenario, it is just as something very minor, some fatigue, and he is going to be available for Game Week 11. But in a worst case scenario, there is going to be some kind of maybe hamstring tear there, which could rule him out for 2 to 4 weeks, something like that, if it is a minor hamstring injury for him. So one to keep an eye on, but that is why he is in the monitor category. Šeško's been playing pretty well, but in terms of FPL, maybe not super well over the last couple of game weeks. So maybe some small concern around there. I think with Šeško, it's not necessarily that he is a bad pick, but I think there are just better options right now, and he is a player that is going to be quite easy to sacrifice if you do want to move in a different direction, but certainly not a must-sell player. Wood and Isak, with ongoing injury issues, might be players worth removing from the team, particularly if, you know, they're maybe not even nailed on when they are available, given the form of their teammates. And Richarlison, a player who continues to be rotation risk. If you do still have him in your squad, he is definitely going to be a kind of player that you might want to remove right now, particularly as Spurs, their fixtures, they're really bad anyway. Even if Richarlison was starting, is he a player you'd want in your squad? Maybe not. But we know at this point that there are certainly some really nice forwards that we can sacrifice a lot of these kind of forwards for, and I think that's what a lot of people will be aiming to do. Wood, Isak, Richarlison are going to be very easy sells for Game Week 11. Looking at those midfielders, and really the story here is there are a lot of midfielders who have been putting up some really nice underlying numbers and looking pretty good, getting opportunities on the pitch, but maybe haven't been scoring a huge amount of points. And Saka is an example of that. He got 2 pretty decent chances to score in Game Week 10 against Burnley. I wouldn't say they were necessarily clear-cut chances. He did generate, I think, something like 0.6 XG during that game, somewhere between 0.4 and 0.6. I can't remember exactly in that one game. Depends where you look as well. Different websites give different stats on that one. But what should be said is that he is getting opportunities, and that is obviously very beneficial when he is on some of those corners, creating chances for his teammates, when he is going to be on penalties, particularly if Gyökeres is going to be out for a few weeks. That pretty much nails on Saka on penalties for the time being, which could be pretty useful as well. So decent underlying numbers. Obviously, he does come at a decent price tag at 10.1 million now, but still probably worth keeping ahead of this run of fixtures, where I don't think any of these teams are going to be super difficult for Arsenal to score in, particularly with the form that they are in. Looking at some other players here who are actually putting up better numbers, better stats than Saka, players like Enzo, great next 2 fixtures, Wolves and Burnley. And if you've been watching Enzo over the last couple of games, you'll probably know that he's maybe been a little unfortunate not to get anything out of these games. So had a really big chance in a last game week against Spurs, for example, where he could have scored in that game, creating for his teammates as well. And as you can see, 2.32 XG in 5 games that he's played in the last 6 game weeks. That is actually really strong data for a 6.7 million midfielder, particularly when you consider that he is going to be the penalty taker most likely for Chelsea as well, and the fixtures are so good in the next 2. Wolves at home, Burnley away. Obviously, we don't know the Wolves' managerial situation for Game Week 11, but they're not going to instantly become an amazing team, you would have thought. We'll see what happens there, but certainly the next 2 game weeks look really nice to keep Enzo. And if you can manage him for Game Week 13 against Arsenal, maybe that's a sell point, or maybe you can hold him beyond, because actually I think from Game Week 14, the fixtures aren't too bad there either. Looking at Mo Salah, he's actually looking okay over the last couple of game weeks. I know maybe gifted a bit of a goal in Game Week 10, giving him a nice big scoreline. But I think really the big thing with Liverpool players in general, maybe Salah is that is kind of the headline of this, is that if you've held on to him for this long, I think you've got to see it out till Game Week 12, because as soon as we hit Game Week 12, we have this really nice run of fixtures for Salah and his Liverpool teammates. So if you've held on this long, I think you just keep going at this point. And hey, look, a nice score from Game Week 10 from Salah. Can't complain too much. We'll see what happens against Man City, but maybe Gakpo can be involved too, because his numbers are actually slightly better than Salah's as well. So he's going to be hopefully a pretty nice option to have going from Game Week 12 onwards too. So these are the kind of players, I think if you can just hold them, have that patience in Game Week 11, difficult fixture against City away. And after that, hopefully you'll be able to reap the rewards where not too many other people have those Liverpool players. So you could be ahead of the crowd a little bit. But it does depend on Liverpool getting back to their best. Maybe we saw the start of that against Aston Villa with their 2-0 victory, but now that they've broken that streak of losses, can we see the best Liverpool again? It's a little early to say, but we've got some good opportunities with the fixtures coming up. Gordon wants a monitor. He's a really difficult player right now, to be honest. And I think really from Gordon down, all of these players could potentially be sold. Gordon, potential penalty taker, probably the penalty taker for Newcastle ahead of Voltemada. Hasn't done a huge amount in recent game weeks, But there are some okay fixtures here. We've got Brentford, we've got Everton, we've got Spurs. These are possibly good fixtures for him. I don't know if I'd be quite ready to give up on Gordon yet, unless there is another midfielder you just desperately want to get into your team. It's the price tag really that puts me off the most with Gordon. 7.5 million. It is a lot of money to be spending for the output that you're currently getting from him. And considering the data is not really there, we are speculating a little bit that he could get better or not. Kudus is going to be a player to sell very soon, I think, but you could maybe give him Manchester United at home, because at the end of the day, Manchester United are a team that are conceding a huge amount of chances this season. So as a home game for Spurs, Kudus probably the star attacker still for this Spurs team. Came, I guess, a little close in Game Week 10 to scoring. He had a pretty decent chance in that game against Chelsea. You would think that, again, if someone's going to score for Spurs, it is likely to be Kudus involved in that, whether that's the goal or assist. He seems the most likely guy at the moment, and Manchester United is a good fixture. But because Kudus is a player you're probably going to want to sell soon regardless, if there is another midfielder you want, then Kudus, again, we're looking at those players who are easier to sacrifice, and I think Kudus certainly falls under that banner, I suppose. Anthony has fallen well out of form, so despite a good fixture against West Ham, he is a player who could potentially be sacrificed. And going into the sell category, Eza may be controversial, but at 7.6 million with pretty mediocre to poor underlying data, I'm still not totally convinced he is a player for FPL necessarily, particularly at that price tag. And more importantly, there are so many good Arsenal assets right now, and Eza is not really breaking the top 5, top 6, maybe even not even in the top 7 Arsenal picks right now. And having Eza could actually be damaging to your team, because it means maybe you've got one less defender from Arsenal. Maybe you can't get to Rice or Saka or Gyökeres if he's available, because you have Eza kind of eating up one of those Arsenal spots. So wonderful football player, but for FPL, I'm not sure he's necessarily the right pick right now. And selling him, maybe downgrading him, he is quite expensive at 7.6, could actually allow you to do some pretty interesting things with your FPL team. And we've also got the Man City duo of Reinders and Doku here in the sell category. I think anyone outside of Haaland is a pretty difficult player to own for Man City right now. There is one other Man City attacker that I am going to talk about in this video, but Reinders, Doku, with that rotation risk, not really providing very much of value right now. Poor underlying data, no actual output either, low scores every week, and the next 2 game weeks are not particularly good fixtures for Man City either. I think it's going to be, again, pretty easy to sell these kind of players. As for your defenders, Timber and Calafiori, for some reason, people are selling them. I think some people are maybe trying to rearrange the kind of Arsenal players they have in their squad at the moment. But I certainly would not be selling defenders. I'm still very, very keen on the 2 Arsenal defensive strategy at the moment, whether that is Gabriel and Raya, Gabriel and Timber, Gabriel and Calafiori. Doesn't really matter too much, but I would stick with what you've got if you have got 2 Arsenal defenders right now. You know, triple Arsenal defense, I am not against it at all. I actually think it could work out pretty well, triple Arsenal defense, because in terms of those defenders, there is no team that is coming close to the, I guess, the clean sheet potential of Arsenal. Whereas we look at some of the attacking players, and I know some people are interested in Saka or Rice or whoever else in the Arsenal attack. There are alternatives to the likes of Saka and Rice right now in FPL, whereas really, no one's really competing with the Arsenal defenders, so I would definitely be keeping all of them, no matter who you have right now. Cucurella, with the next 2 fixtures, I would certainly be looking to keep as well. I know Chelsea haven't looked great defensively, but fixtures are very important when it comes to picking our defenders, and Wolves and Burnley, you don't get too much better than that when you're looking for clean sheets. Senesi wants a monitor, and the reason for that is because Bournemouth are looking slightly weaker defensively recently, but he is very close to being a keeper. He would be one of those players that you only sell if you are desperate to sell a defender. You're desperate to move, and he is the only way you can get a really nice defender in your team. Because actually, after Aston Villa in Game Week 11, we've got West Ham at home, Sunderland away, Everton at home. These are pretty decent fixtures for Bournemouth. But just wanted to make you guys aware that Bournemouth and their defence has started to dip a little bit recently, and maybe there is some concern there. But Senesi still really, really good for those defensive contributions. 69 now in the past 6 game weeks. Only Chris Richards has more than Senesi, I believe, over the past 6 game weeks. So really, really impressive stuff from Chris Richards, but also, of course, Senesi. So yeah, certainly a player you would ideally like to keep in your team. And hopefully, when these good fixtures come, then the defense can start to straighten up again for Bournemouth. That's what we kind of want to see right now. Virgil, is he worth the price tag? 6 million. Is he blocking Arsenal defenders? These are the questions you need to ask before considering selling him, because from game week 12, as we mentioned, Liverpool, phenomenal fixtures. And Virgil, another player doing really well for DEFCON right now. 63 for him. And I think really any defender who is getting, if we're looking through these tables, and we have defensive contributions on those slides for midfielders and defenders, anything you see above 50 for a defender probably means you are going to pretty reliably get some DEFCON from these players. If we're looking at players at 60 or above, we're looking at players who are going to get DEFCON most game weeks, like the majority of game weeks, which is really, really nice. And that is what Virgil is. But is he worth 6 million? Can we get, players from Crystal Palace or indeed Bournemouth, like Senesi, get these players who are significantly cheaper and actually offering a similar output in terms of those defensive contributions and clean sheet potential right now? Is he worth the money? And I think that's the big question with Virgil. But if you've kept him this long, you probably got to stick with him past game week 11 and into game week 12, I think. Dan Burn. Now, Newcastle have looked poor defensively recently, to be honest. Maybe Pope is not quite on it at the moment. I don't think Burn is really working too well in the left-back position. And other than Malik Chow, nobody has really been in great form in that Newcastle defence recently. Mistakes are being made. We've seen Botman scoring the own goal at the weekend, of course. Emil Kraft coming in at right back with no Trippier and having to be hooked at half time. I wonder a little bit, now that Hall is going to be back, is Hall going to come in and be the left back for Newcastle? Then who are the centre backs going to be? Well, Malik Chow is just undroppable right now. Who's going to be the left centre back? Is it going to be Burn? Is it going to be Botman? Will he continue to be trusted? Will it be Fabian Schär? Because actually, I think really the two best centre-backs that I've seen when watching Newcastle over the last few weeks, it has been Chow and Schär. They've kind of been the two best centre-backs, which kind of questions, where does that leave Burn? Where does he fit in? Now, of course, knowing Eddie Howe, Burn could go on and play every game for the rest of time as long as he's fit. But you do have to wonder a little bit, with Newcastle's defensive form dipping, with the fixtures looking a little tougher, and some concerns around who is going to play now that players are returning from injury, there has to be some question marks around Burn, and I actually would be willing to sell him if you have a nice replacement in mind. So there you go. Let me know what you think about that one, guys. I'm very curious to know. Alderete, if you still have him in your team, you may as well keep him. He's not too bad for 4.1 million, I suppose. And as for yourselves, we're looking at those Spurs defenders, really. Man United and Arsenal in the next two. Pretty rough fixtures for both Spurs defenders there. And, of course, Frimpong with his injury. Been a bit of a nightmare pick for anyone who has picked up on him. Yeah, gotta get rid. And guys, if you enjoy Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid, make sure you do drop a like on the video. It really does help out the channel so much. And do feel free to subscribe if you like this content and you want it in your feeds every single game week. Okay, it's time to look at some replacement players for those players that you might be thinking about selling. And of course, Erling Haaland is going to be at the top of this list once again. Destroying all competition. I have to say, guys, when Gabriel got his clean sheet, his assist, I was thinking, yeah, maybe we should have captained Gabriel after all. But Erling Haaland comes in, scores 2 goals, and it's the same story all over again. Game week 9 blank, just a blip for the big man. And it seems he's back to his best, even against Liverpool and Newcastle. Like I say, Newcastle, it's not such a bad time to play Newcastle. Liverpool, it's probably not such a bad time to play them either. I would still have a reasonable amount of confidence in Haaland. So even if you still don't have him, I would still be thinking about buying him. Mateta seems to be the clear second best forward to go for right now. Really, really good underlying numbers. Another goal in game week 10, which is really good to see. And the fixtures are great. Brighton concede a lot of goals. We've got Wolves, Man United and Burnley after that as well, which are all some of the weakest defences in the Premier League that we've seen so far. Thiago is still my pick of the bunch for those 6.2 or kind of cheaper, I suppose, forwards to go for. Newcastle at home, not so bad right now. Brighton, Burnley after that, it's pretty decent. It's pretty nice. And I think Thiago is going to be able to go toe-to-toe with the likes of, Welbeck, Voltemada, some of those other forwards that are maybe a little bit more expensive than him. I think Thiago can go toe-to-toe with these kind of guys, but we'll drop into the monitor section because the 3 buys are actually the same 3 buys as from the Game Week 10 list. I think maybe some slight changes in the monitor section. I would now put Welbeck above Voltemada at this point because we now know Voltemada is probably not going to be on penalties. Welbeck is continuing to score for Brighton, which is nice. And actually, the fixtures are far more in Welbeck's favour than they are Voltemada's favour now. Obviously, in Game Week 10, with that West Ham fixture for Newcastle, that looked like a pretty good jumping on point for Voltemada. Famous last words they were in the end. But really, from this point, I think we maybe pivot a little bit in terms of the kind of players we're looking to pick up. Don't get me wrong, the Newcastle fixtures are, they're okay. They are probably pretty average fixtures for a team, but if there are other opportunities to pick some players with slightly better fixtures, like Mateta, like Thiago, like Welbeck, then if you don't have these players already, you may as well go for them. You may as well punt onto them. Looking at the monitors a little further down, Mark Yu, I think going for a 2-forward kind of strategy, I think is still going to work really well. So a Haaland and Mateta as your 2 starting forwards, and then sticking a Mark Yu at 4.2 million on your bench, last place on your bench, and just spend that money elsewhere, I think is a pretty good strat right now. But Joao Pedro is maybe a player you can consider right now if you think he is going to be back in form now, because we did see a lot of the stuff we've dreamt of for weeks and weeks and weeks from Joao Pedro in Game Week 10. Just that concern about Delap coming in and spoiling the party that is re-emerged for Joao Pedro before it really takes off. If you don't have Ekatike, would not be buying him this week against Man City away. Seems a pretty random transfer, really considering the fixture difficulty, and maybe Ekatike hasn't been in the best form in more recent game weeks. Gyökeres, with his injury concerns, don't think I would go there, and I think the Krupi Jr. ship has sailed now that Evan Nilsson coming back in Game Week 10 off the bench. And I think next game week 11, could be the week that Krupi Jr. returns to the bench, Evan Nilsson starts. And actually, that could benefit the likes of Semenyo and help get Semenyo back to his best as well in Game Week 11. As for your midfielders, Ismail Assar would be the player to buy. Blank in Game Week 10, but he did show some promise in that game. He shows promise in every game, let's be real. He's been really good for that underlying data. We've seen him, dominate Liverpool every time he plays him, for example, in the Cups. And the fixtures are just great for Crystal Palace right now. I love Brighton at home. I love Wolves away. I love Man United at home. I love Burnley away. A lot of these fixtures also will suit someone like Sarr. So Brighton and Manchester United in particular, I think are going to suit Sarr quite nicely. And given that Wolves and Burnley are away fixtures, you do have to wonder about those ones as well, how good they're going to be for Sarr as a slightly more transitional style player in that Crystal Palace team. But I'm really, really curious to see what he can produce at 6.6 million. That looks like really good value for money. Even if you've got Mateta, I don't mind the double up really on the Crystal Palace attack. I really don't mind at all. And Burmo's still very much a player to look at. I think really Game Week 12 is maybe a slightly better jumping on point than Game Week 11, given the fixture is Spurs away for Manchester United. But the numbers, again, pretty decent in Game Week 10, despite a blank, and I still think there's plenty to like about the Manchester United winger. Enzo, still a potential buy as far as I'm concerned. Nailed on, 90-minute man, on penalties, on some set pieces, great fixtures, great underlying data. Yes, he hasn't been scoring a huge amount of FPL points, but he has been an unfortunate underperformer recently. And, it's not like Joao Pedro from maybe when we were looking at him last week, where the data wasn't there and the points weren't there. With Enzo, actually, the data is very much there. It's just the points haven't quite arrived yet. And I think the underlying data we see from Enzo, 12 shots, 2.32 XG, 9 key passes. These are kind of numbers that we like the look of, and they often indicate good things in the future. Now, Declan Rice is a player over the last few game weeks I really have changed my mind on, and I see him just rising up and up and up in the monitor category to an extent where he could arguably be a buy at this point. And that's because his data is actually not bad at all. It really, really isn't. So he has been overperforming, but don't get me wrong, there is still some positive signs here. So 13 key passes, for example, is really, really nice. That is one of the higher numbers among midfielders in the Premier League over this 6-game week sample size. So pretty decent. He's taking shots as well, and being on free kicks, being on corners is always going to give you an opportunity for FPL points for Arsenal. And actually, he surprised me with his defensive contributions too as well. So with midfielders, when we look at the defensive contributions column, I'm looking for players at 60 or more really, if we're looking for regular, reliable defensive contribution points. And Rice is actually doing that this season. He's at 61 in 6 game weeks, which I think is pretty good for what it is. So actually, Rice, it's a bit of a surprise package. Did not expect to see him as one of the better midfielders in FPL, but he very much is right now, and I think he has to be considered even at 6.8 million. Minter, out of those cheaper midfielders, he is certainly going to be a target. 2 assists in Game Week 10, which was pretty nice for him. But he seems like, again, another reliable player for minutes. Fairly decent underlying numbers for his price tag, and we got some good fixtures coming up for Brighton as well. Maybe not the perfect fixtures, but I would say these fixtures are above average. Caicedo, another interesting 6 million man if you fancy going for him. Obviously, he's getting defensive contributions, but he is hugely overperforming with his attacking returns this season. So if you are getting him, do it because you like DEFCON, not because you're expecting a goal or an assist every week, because it's just not very likely. Look, it could happen. But Caicedo, over his career, has not always been a goal-scoring player. Yes, occasionally he'll pop up with a goal, but it's, not really been a regular thing. Semenyo, it's maybe not the week to buy him if you don't have him already. Aston Villa have actually improved defensively a lot over the last few weeks. Yes, I know they just lost 2-0 to Liverpool, but they really have looked a bit better. So if you haven't got Semenyo, could you wait one more week? Could Game Week 12 be a better time to buy? I'm going to put Neto in a void because I'm not really sure what he offers that someone like Enzo doesn't offer. We see similar levels of creativity. Enzo slightly better for attack, and as for minutes for attack, I mean for goals, goal potential, shots, that kind of thing. And Neto, I think there is some rotation risk there for him as well. It's not going to be a true rotation risk player, but yeah, certainly a player who is more likely to miss out than someone like Enzo. And given that Neto is actually more expensive by 0.4 million, again, I don't really see the value there. Cherki is an interesting pick here, but given that he plays Liverpool and Newcastle up next, I would maybe pause on him and keep an eye on him. However, I think this could be a really nice pick very, very soon. I'm not quite ready to put him in a monitor or a buy, but I think certainly he is one to watch in the games that he does play. If you are watching Man City, keep an eye on Cherki, see what he's up to, because he is clearly a very talented player, and he could be that second Man City player that we've been dreaming of. It's probably going to be, if he can keep his place in the Man City Premier League team, we're probably looking at Game Week 13, maybe as a jumping on point for him, but it's not going to be for another couple of weeks. Unfortunately, we just need more information, and we need to pass these less than ideal fixtures for him, I suppose. Gravenberch is also going to go in a void, even if you do think his attacking returns are sustainable, and maybe you do. Again, Man City away is just a pretty poor jumping on point for him, but the data's not been great. The defensive contributions is not particularly good as well. I think maybe give him another game week. If you do, for some reason, think that he can keep scoring 2 goals every 0.2 XG, then yeah, crack on, but surely not away against Man City. Surely this is not the one, not the week. Defenders to buy. Gabriel is probably one of 2 essential players in FPL, along with Erling Haaland. They're just the 2 best FPL assets in the game right now, aren't they? And they proved that again in Game Week 10. Still be more than willing to double up with Jurrien Timber as my second Arsenal defender. He still probably looks like the second best player to go for there. But after that, we're probably looking at Crystal Palace defenders if you are looking to pick someone up for this game week. Now, of course, Brighton is not the easiest fixture for a defender, but someone like Munoz has enough attacking threat that actually, from an attacking perspective, maybe this fixture actually could be pretty good for Munoz. Mark Gay has been another surprising player when it comes to DEFCON. We mentioned earlier about looking for maybe defenders with 50 or more defensive contributions over a 6 game week period, and we see 62 for Mark Gay over that period. So really, really nice numbers there. Are we expecting a clean sheet immediately against Brighton? Maybe, but probably not. It is a home game, which does help, but defensive contributions are going to be there, which is really, really beneficial. Senesi wants to monitor. Aston Villa not been great in attack, so this could potentially be a time to jump on, maybe. But again, if you haven't got Senesi, could you wait one more week? Could you wait till game week 12 before jumping on? Those Chelsea defenders, I think, are a little bit too expensive to be buying, but if you already have these guys, of course you're going to keep them, but are they buys? Can we maybe get better value for money from some of the other picks? I think potentially. You can get an Arsenal defender for the same price as Cucurella. And even against Wolves and Burnley, Arsenal with a difficult fixture is just as good, if not better, than Chelsea with the easiest fixture in the entire league. So for that reason, we do have to put these pretty low on the monitor, because just for a value for money perspective, and of course Reece James with maybe some injury concerns that seem to pop up every every time anyone seems to buy James, yeah, he punishes you, doesn't he? Mukiele, one to avoid, just not a good game week to buy him, really, I don't think. Matty Cash, maybe a similar situation ahead of the Bournemouth game. But like I said, Aston Villa improving defensively. Could we revisit Aston Villa defenders ahead of game week 12? Maybe, probably not 11. DEFCON still a concern for those Aston Villa defenders. They just do not get it. Van der Ven is going to be able to avoid once again for this game week. It's a difficult couple of fixtures for Spurs. Actually, it's a very difficult couple of months, really, in terms of fixtures for Spurs. So would be looking elsewhere if looking to pick up a new defender. DEFCON not there. Low expected clean sheets there. Maybe he can get the odd goal, but again, can we get just as much and more from some of the other players at a similar price? I think so. And looking at the goalkeepers, finally, if you've got Pope, I think he is worth keeping. If you've got Sells ahead of Leeds at home under Sean Dyche, maybe that could be a nice little fixture for Sells if you do, for some reason, still have him in your team. If you have Alisson, of course, you're going to sell him. I'm going to put Donnarumma as a potential sell here as well, because I think 5.7 million is just way too much money for Donnarumma, and you could get probably just as much for your money there, free up a bit of cash there, and maybe do something else with it if you were to sell Donnarumma. Actually, City are not too bad for those defensive numbers, but they're just never a team we can trust for clean sheets, are they? In terms of buying a new goalkeeper, Raya still a number one choice. Sanchez, I'm going to throw in here as well, as he is just going to be a long-term nailed goalkeeper for Chelsea, pretty cost effective at 4.8 million going into that Chelsea defense. He's obviously dropped in price since the start of the season, so actually you're getting a cut price Chelsea asset for defense, which is not too bad given the fixtures. And we're going to go for Avoid Pope. If you don't have him already, it is not a good time to buy. Same situation with Donnarumma. So there are your goalkeepers. If there is any players we didn't mention today in today's video, let me know and I'll give them a rating, buy, sell, keep, or an avoid. If you enjoyed this one, drop a like, do subscribe if you're new around here. Plenty of content coming throughout the week. So thank you so much for watching once again, and I will see you later, mates. Bye-bye.